When I worked at Schaefer, I was at Schaefer Vineyards for 6 years. And one of the things that I used to tell people when I would do tastings with them is that, when I bite into an apple and when you bite into an apple, how can you guarantee that we taste the same thing? And I would tell people to apply that to wine. I'm like, hey, some people love the big, rich, buttery Chardonnays, and some people really like the bright, acidic, non-mallow Chards. Like there's so much variation, and the art of winemaking is almost biblical in the sense that the art itself has been around since time and the beginning of time, essentially. And the art itself hasn't changed, but every winemaker is a unique person, just like their fingerprints. And so, of course, their wines are going to be different. And, it's not sacrilege if you try, the next big cab and you don't like it. It is what it is. Some people may love it. Some people may not. It is, it's a matter of taste. So...
Welcome, everybody, back to the Barrels and Roots podcast. I have an awesome guest with me today. Now, would you like to tell people who you are and a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, of course. So my name is Lailand Oberschulte. I am a Napa Valley native, second generation wine enthusiast. Born and raised here in the Valley. I've worked in every facet of the industry, from the vineyards and the cellar to hospitality, DTC. And currently, I am the vice president of marketing for OrderPort, which is a DTC platform for wineries. And we do everything from wine clubs to e-commerce to point of sale and websites. So yeah, I'm really excited to be here.
That's awesome. And it's interesting to talk to you too, because I love talking to people that are on the brand facing, the forward facing side, so the people that are working with marketing, that are working with this side, because one of the things that's cool is like, you get to paint stories about wine, and, and I love to be able to be able to put out there my experience with wine, because I grew up living in the Napa Valley as well. I moved there when I was in high school, but then spent, through college, and my family still lives there. And one of the things that was interesting is that my experience with wine is very different from what the cultural experience that people think is wine. You watch movies and, you have these people, oh, Buffy, this wine is a, wonderful vintage, and the fact is that, for my family, friends, and I, it was normal, really awesome people that were just making this stuff and around it and drinking it. And that was something that I found that was a misunderstanding that people had about wine. But what's one thing that you find most people misunderstand about wine right from the start?
The one thing that I have noticed, and one thing that I've worked to actively combat most of my career, is kind of that same concept that wine is very snooty and very exclusive, and and it's really not. And there is a wine out there for every palate, and people are like, oh, well, maybe I'm not tasting what I'm supposed to, or, this is a $300 bottle of wine, but I really don't like it. What's wrong with me? And it's like, well, there's nothing wrong with you. Like, it's, wine is so personal, but I feel like there's this misconception that you're supposed to like a specific type of wine, or, it's a famous label, I'm supposed to love it, and I really don't. Like, and it's, the multitudes of wines that are made, not only in the Napa Valley, but California and the nationwide, there is a wine out there for everyone. And one of the great joys of it is that you get to try a lot of them until you find the one that you really like. So
I love that. Well, today I'm trying to make wine fun again. So I have a whole series of reels that I just filmed that will be going up next week, or maybe the next, that were, if certain celebrities were a wine, what would they be? And I won't give them all away, but
I
was
love
like,
it.
right? And so I was going through and I was like, all right, if this person was a celebrity, what wine would they be? And it was like, what struck me was like, you can get influencers, movie stars, actors, like you get someone like, I don't know, Taylor Swift. well, what would Taylor Swift be? Would she
Oh,
be, she's got this broad appeal. Lots of people like her. She's, a little bit edgy, but easy to listen to at the same time. And she kind of has this broad range. Well, what type of wine would that be? So like you get these
yeah.
different people and, you get Dwayne Johnson. I would think Dwayne is going to be some type of, I'm thinking Dwayne is some type of like Howell Mountain Cab, something that's really got that deep substance. It's got this, it's full, it's big. You might not like it. You might love it, And
Yeah.
and so but what I was getting to with the whole point of those reels was like, there is you don't have to love Taylor Swift. Maybe she's not your jam, and maybe she is, and that's okay. Maybe you like Dwayne Johnson. Maybe you like IShow Speed. Maybe you like, Mr. Beast. Everyone has their own thing that they enjoy, and
Exactly.
there it's different for all of us. And yet there's this preconceived idea that with wine, if you love wine, you love all wine. No, you don't
No.
have to.
Oh God, no. Definitely not.
Right? That was something I had to realize is like, growing up in the Napa Valley where, Napa Cab is Napa Cab. It's intense. It is bold.
Cab
And
is king. Yep.
Cab is king. And sometimes I can't hang with them, and I love my Pinot. I love Merlot, and I know that sounds like to people like, oh, you don't love the cabs as much. It's like, no, I do. But it's not my jam all the time. That's not the
Yeah.
way I go all the time. And I think that was something that for me, I had to acknowledge, and there are cabs that I
Mhm.
absolutely love. But there's
Mhm.
sometimes that I'm just like, it's a bit much for me, and sometimes you want something else.
Oh, I'm 100% in the same boat. I was raised drinking Italian varietals. We made
Mm,
Italian field varietals. My dad grew Primitivo and Sangiovese and, Petit Syrahs. And so that's what I was raised on. And so people offer me Cab and I'm like, yeah, I'm sure. Like, yeah, I'll drink it. Am I going to love it? Maybe, maybe not. But I
right,
definitely, there's so much more to Napa and so much more to wine than Cab.
right,
And when I worked at Schaefer, I was at Schaefer Vineyards for 6 years. And one of the things that I used to tell people when I would do tastings with them is that, when I bite into an apple and when you bite into an apple, how can you guarantee that we taste the same thing?
right.
And I would tell people to apply that to wine. I'm like, hey, some people love the big, rich, buttery Chardonnays, and some people really like the bright, acidic, non-mallow Chards. Like there's so much
Yeah,
variation, and the art of winemaking is almost biblical in the sense that the art itself has been around since time and the beginning of time, essentially. And the art itself hasn't changed, but every winemaker is a unique person, just like their fingerprints. And so, of course, their wines are going to be different. And, it's not sacrilege if you try, the next big cab and you don't like it. It is what it
yeah.
is. Some people may love it, some people may not. It is, it's a matter of taste. So,
I love that. And I do love um I love that you brought up that it is so old. Like this is something that has been around with humanity from the beginning of our like of like advanced
collective
cultural like
consciousness. Yeah.
right. We've been doing this. And I was like. We recently, I split my time between the U.S. and Southeast Asia, and we were flying back to the U.S. and we flew over Qatar, and then over just across all of like Europe and Mesopotamia, like what was the Middle East, and like this ancient places. And I was looking down at the flight path, and like all of these names were popping up of locations that were names like ancient names of cities, but were also varietals. And I was just like, oh, we were flying over this one place in the Middle East, and I looked down and it was like Muscat, and I was like, that's like the one, like that's where it's from,
That's where it
like
came from.
that's where it came from, like right there, like that's what they grew, And then we were just journeying across the world, and I just kept looking down and thinking about I'm thinking about wine when I'm flying over places, and I'm just like, wow, all of that wine that grew from all these places. And but what was interesting to me was it made me think about how something so simple, so ancient can connect people for so long, And now we have all of these regions, and I am horrible with the French word, I can never pronounce it, you know? It's like, but the idea is like whatever is grown in these different places, it tastes so different because the location, the way it's just like the way two people that are raised in two different cities, you ever
Mhm.
see those twin studies where they separate the twins and then they
Oh,
like
yeah.
and like the same DNA, but when they grow up in different places, there's similarities, but there's these
But
differences that
they're
are really
very different.
interesting.
Well, a Cabernet produced in Napa versus a Cabernet produced in France. Like they're
Right.
wildly different, and it's because of that terroir, it's because of where they come from. And that's one of the things that I love. Probably one of the most things that I love about the wine industry is having the opportunity to showcase those stories because yeah, it's the rock and the soil and the weather patterns and all of that, but it's also the people behind it
Yeah.
that really like again, a Cabernet grape is a Cabernet grape regardless of where it's planted, but how you
But
shape that and how you bring it in and then how you tell those stories, like that's truly I think what sets wines apart. And you can tell there's people that are in it because they genuinely love nothing more than being in those vineyards and growing those grapes and making those wines and being in the cellar. And there are some people that are so all consumed by that, and you can tell. And it's so refreshing and it's so neat to see because I feel like there's a lot of people in the world nowadays, especially here in the Napa Valley, they want to check it off their bucket list. They want to have, they want to produce Napa's next cult cab, but it's because it's kind of a benchmark. It's kind of a notch on the belt. It's not necessarily for the passion or for the craft. But the other side of that is there are so many people that really are doing it because this is their genuine passion and they love it so much. And
yeah.
it's so fun. And, I've watched Napa change a lot in the time that I've lived here, growing up here and watching the wine industry evolve and morph into what it is today. And, there's so many pros and cons in that. There's so many more people involved in wine and enjoying wine now than there was probably 25, 30 years ago, which is fantastic. But the industry has evolved along with it. And so it's really interesting to see how those cultural shifts have changed the valley, changed the landscape, but also changed the drinking landscape and changed how people approach wine. And I would like to think that as things change, that wine is becoming more approachable. You don't have to
Mm,
have these massive 10,000 bottles. Each bottle is worth $500. Like, that sort of perception I think has changed. That's essentially my parents' generation way of looking at it. But our generation, or my generation at the very least, I'm considered an elder millennial. We really just like wine. We don't necessarily care if it's a Screaming Eagle. We
yeah.
don't care if it's some, $1,000 cold cab. Frankly, none of us can afford that. So it's like we would rather, a $22 bottle of, some red blend that we like the label, we like the story, we like the people that produce it because we can drink it on a Tuesday and not feel bad about it, versus opening a
Right.
really, really expensive bottle and then getting to the end of it and being like, oh, I spent all that money and I didn't really like that. Like, so it's, which has definitely happened a couple of times to me. And I'm
I've
like,
done that.
oh, I feel
I've
really
been
bad
there.
now.
But, ooh,
Yeah.
that
Well,
was just a lot of money. Mm.
that was a
What?
learning experience, duly noted.
Right, right. I mean, and it's something that like, and this is something that I wish people had have told me at the beginning of my wine journey. Um, it was just to get out there and not to judge the experience, not to judge the journey. That I think that with all those preconceived about ideas about wine, people come in and they're like, "Ooh, I don't want to do it wrong. I don't want to mess up. I don't want to embarrass myself." And I think that the reality of learning anything is that there is a time period where you will embarrass yourself, and
Most definitely.
and I think that for me, I when I was first starting out, I had some great people around me. I worked at a couple small restaurants, and I had people around me that were just like, "Dude, try this, try a glass of this, see what you like." And I'm like, don't like that so much. And they're like, "That's great. That's a great awareness." They're like, "So you probably would like something like this instead." I try that. I'm like, "Yeah, that's tasty." And they're like, "Okay." Now you're starting to figure out what your palate is. And
Yeah.
it it was just this patience by people who were
Mhm.
willing to share what they were passionate about. If you were to tell someone who's just starting their wine journey, like, um, some advice on this, what should they pay attention to when they first start tasting?
Well, I would say there's a couple of things on that list. First of all, give yourself some grace in the sense
Yeah.
that, you're going to have to try some things. You're probably going to ask some dumb questions and you're probably going to stumble over a couple of things. In, you know what, in today's world, who cares? This is your journey. This is your exploration. And it's about learning about what you like. It doesn't matter what the person across the table or what the sommelier or thinks or whatever it is. It's literally a matter of personal taste. And so I would say not only give yourself some grace, but ask your friends, ask your family, because wine is such a social glue. It is such a social
Yeah.
and nostalgic opportunity because taste is so heavily associated with memory. And
Yes.
so I think, and be open. Be open to exploring. Be open to trying things. I mean, my favorite rosé is $6. If you've
I love
got,
that.
if you're stuck on this notion that, oh, well, cheap wine isn't necessarily good wine, it's like, not necessarily true. There's some really good inexpensive wines out there. Be very open-minded, be willing to try anything, be willing to approach anything and ask the dumb questions. It doesn't matter because I've had plenty of people in tastings be like, well, this is only like my second or third wine tasting, I don't want to sound stupid. I'm like, you know what, I don't care, because as someone who genuinely enjoys wine and enjoys the experience of sharing it with people, I want to be able to help you. I want to be able to help people experience things. And how else are you going to learn if you don't ask questions?
I love that. I had a friend who talked to me about the world of wine in the US versus other places by comparing it to cars. And I was like,
Hmm.
okay, this is an interesting one. And he's like, in the US, some of the wine market is so focused on the elite cars, the
Hmm.
very
Yeah.
I'm gonna show you my Rolls Royce. Well, my Maserati. Ooh, I have a Lamborghini. And like some of these, big cabs are like, or are these really expensive bottles of wine are like that. But he's like, you know
Yeah.
what? He's like, us Europeans, they're like, we have this different approach. We also see wine as a day-to-day thing. So
Yeah.
we have the Honda Civics of wine. We have the Toyota Camry and Corollas, and they're great because it's like you
Yeah.
don't have to just, if you're a car person, you're a car person, and you can find an appreciation for a well-made Honda Civic just as much as you can for that Lamborghini because they
Mhm.
simply serve different purposes, and
Mhm.
if you can recognize that both of them have their place. Now, certainly there are cars that are pretty horrible, and there are some that are just like about ready that shouldn't be on the road. And I'm sure there are wines that shouldn't be in the bottle, but you know what? For the most
Yeah.
part, you can find stuff that's good, and it
Mhm.
just is about thinking about what purpose it's going to serve. But let me ask you this, though, too, because, it kind of plays into that. What I was talking about there is what tells you a wine is well made, even if it's not expensive? How do you know something's good?
See, it's a matter of taste. So I don't know if I can answer that.
Yeah. But see,
you
that's a
know,
great answer.
well, you know what? Total transparency. Some of the best wines that I've ever had didn't come from a wine shop. They didn't come from a
Mm.
restaurant. They got pulled out of somebody's cellar and they have a piece of duct tape on them because it's something that was truly a passion project for someone. And it
I
was
love that.
something that they care about so deeply that they're willing to share it. And I know,
Yeah.
and I'm kind of the, I luckily for me, I am the exception in that rule that we are so lucky to have that experience, especially living here in the Valley. Almost everybody that we know makes some sort of garage
Yep.
wine in some way, shape, or
Yep.
form, even if it's, 12 cases, 20 cases, whatever it might be. Um, but, I think in like a broader scope, looking, for the average consumer, it's, find a story that appeals to you. And as we navigate kind of a challenging economical landscape, one of the things that we're starting to see is that people are buying brands that they are value aligned with. And so
Mm.
if the time and energy allows for it, do a little bit of research. Find, if you're trying to be conscious about where you spend your money, do a little research. Find a small producer that makes that really beautiful Vermentino that you love. Like, whatever it might be, find that small Pinot producer on the Mendocino coast that is kind of this like best kept secret that nobody talks about. Like, do your research, I think. And but the thing is wine's going to vary just because, again, oh, I love cabs. It's like, well, a cab from Stag's Leap versus a cab from Diamond Mountain are going to be two very different things. Do your research, and if the time allows, if not, again, ask for recommendations, whether you're with friends or at a restaurant. And even like if you're in the valley, one of the things that I've always recommended to guests when they sit with me for tastings is they're like, well, where should I go next? I'm like, well, I can give you my list of favorites. I said, and then what you're going to do, you're going to ask your server tonight at dinner. You're going to ask your hotel concierge. You're going to
Yeah.
ask the locals where they would go, because they're going to have friends at these small wineries. They're going to have
Mm-hmm.
friends that work at these little labels tucked back off of, Vallejo Street in St. Helena, like these tiny
Right.
brands that may not have that mainstream recognition, but odds are they're going to be producing something really fun. And so that has always been my recommendation is talk to people and explore, learn as much as you can. But, there's a lot of different ways to engage with wine, which is super cool. And it's like, yeah, it's easy if you can just go to Total Wine and More and, buy a 6-pack of something. Like that's easy. But one of the opportunities I think that we have now, especially in today's world, because everything's online, do some research. Follow social medias or go online and Google, best Vermentino or, best Prosecco or whatever it is that you're interested in. And then find some small producers and do some research. Read their tasting notes, reach out to their tasting room and just be like, hey, I'm interested in your wine. What can you tell me about it? And the people that are truly in this for passion, you're going to have to tell them to stop talking and that you have to get off the phone because you have other things to do, because they're going to be so excited about the fact that you're interested in their brand and you're interested in their wine. They're going to want to engage with you. And I would do that where I would get stuck on the phone. I was also at Quintessa for a long time. And we had people that they would end up obsessed with either like our Flowers Pinot or we did Faust. There was the red blend that was done through Faust in the cabs. And people would just be so curious and so enamored. And I would look down at my phone and 45 minutes later, we're still talking. And so I think for people that are truly passionate about wine and truly genuinely interested in learning more, it's do your research and find your producers that you align with, values or otherwise, whether they're organic or, they're no-till farming or, whatever the piece is that interests you the most. Do some research and then engage, whether you send them an email or call or send them a DM on Instagram, whatever it might be. Engage with the brand and learn. And I think that being open to that is a huge opportunity for people, because it's going to give you the experience and you're going to have the chance to really learn from someone who's genuinely passionate about not only what they do, but the product they're producing. And it's infectious. When somebody gets really, really excited about a wine that they enjoy, like, I'm like, just based on your reaction alone, like, I want to try it because you're so excited about it. And it makes it fun. It's a fun way to learn.
I have my own content marketing company, and I have a team in Southeast Asia. We do videos for people, and we produce like 1,000 reels plus a month. We're just doing
Oh my
a
gosh.
massive amount of content. Yeah, we do, and we do great work. That's what we do. I've got like 18 editors, and but all for me, I started off at the early days about just doing photography. Like that was where I got started,
Mm-hmm.
and if someone comes up to me and says, "Hey, I have all of my high tech new gear, but I still also carry around some film cameras just because
Yeah.
it's what I love. I grew up on that, and it's nostalgic for me." And if someone comes up and says, "Hey, nice camera, can you tell me about it?" And I'm just like, "Oh, yes, I can.
How long do
Yes,
you
I
have?
yeah, yes, I can. I most definitely can tell you about this camera. Are you ready to sit down?" And I love it when you do that. Like my brother, my brother lives in the valley still, and he works in restaurants and such. And his old landlord had like a small. He just was making his own garage wine, and he gave us a bottle one night. And he was a winemaker at a big winery, but this was his own little passion project that he was doing at home, and he gave us something, and it was a non-name wine. I have no idea what it was. It was so long ago, but my God, I can still remember that bottle. It was so good. It was so good. And he was telling us all this stuff. And I just was so stressed in my life at that moment that just hearing this story and just having that glass and putting on some music, it was just like everything slowed down. And it was just like I can't even remember what was said, but I remember that night. I can see around, I can see who was all there, and I just remember the experience, and I remember how good the wine was. And I mean, like, isn't that at the end of the day part of what makes wine so special? And it's so different than cocktails and beer, and no hate at those at all. They have their place. But with wine, it's this shared experience that is so special to me.
It's so singular. And because it's such a sensory experience, I think that,
Hmm.
like I said, taste and smell are such a huge part of memory. And the fact that you remember that moment so distinctly,
Yeah.
it's really special. And I think that, wine is very special in that respect. And, we have a tradition in our family where when you turn 21, you are gifted a case of wine from your birth year.
Oh,
And it's
wow.
12 bottles, all made the year you were born. And
Wow.
for the next 12 years, from 21 on, you open up a bottle each year on your birthday and you get to drink it and experience it. And I'm not going to tell you how many anniversaries of my 21st I've celebrated, but I've had a few.
Wow.
And
Wow.
but I can distinctly remember every single one of those bottles. And so
Wow.
I have two children. And so I've started collecting wine for their birth year as well as like my goddaughter. And that is my hope, is that, they're going to be, my kids probably not so much. My goddaughter, her mother is a winemaker. And so our hope is that she's going to grow up and, follow in her mom's footsteps. But it's so special and it's so immersive. And it's one of those things that, well, it's funny. I worked for Camus Vineyards for a long time as well, and I've done every side of the business from about 50 cases to well over 500,000 cases. And there was a saying by Charlie Wagner Sr., who was the original founder of the brand, that the essential premise was, with one bottle of wine, four strangers can become friends.
Yes.
And we loved that quote. We used it all the
Oh my
time. And it's
goodness.
true because it's so immersive, and it's an opportunity to connect over such a shared experience. And that's why people
Love
bring
that.
wine to dinner, and that's why people gift wine. And it's such a fantastic way to connect with people. And so one of my favorite things in the entire world to do is, every time that I get the very, very few wine clubs that I belong to the one that's ran by my best friend. And I hoard her wine, but I also love to give it away because I
That's
love being
awesome.
able to be like, this is such an experience. This wine is something you have to try. And I
Yeah.
love being able to not only do that for her because I want to see her brand grow and succeed, but because I love her wine genuinely so much, and it makes me so excited that I'm like, this is a very, very important piece of my world that I want you to experience too. And so I always have to, I hoard one or two bottles for myself when I get them each year, but I do my best to give them away because her brand is so spectacular and everything that she's doing is so great that I'm like, you guys have to try this. It is such an experience. I want you to be able to enjoy this. And so I make a point of as giving away. It's heartbreaking simultaneously as exciting because, like, oh, I don't get to drink that, but yay, somebody else gets to try it. And it's kind of this
Yeah.
weird juxtaposition, but I love it. So it's so much
It's
fun.
kind of like you have a bunch of puppies. You want to keep
Yeah.
all the puppies, but you also want to share the puppies. But
You
giving away
wanna
one of
share
those
the
puppies,
puppies.
you want to share the puppies. You have to have one of these puppies. They're so cute. And yet at the
Yeah.
same time, you're like, I want all the puppies, you know?
Yeah,
Keep
exactly.
them.
Yeah.
Keep them.
And,
Oh,
it's and like I said, as more people start to engage with wine and they're interested in wine, you know, there's their wine is made in all 50 states in the United States, never mentioned worldwide. And there are, I think it's something like 12,000 wineries in the United States or in North America between Canada, the United States, and Mexico. And I mean, holy crap. Think of all of the
that's a lot of wine.
opportunities there. Like that's, and some of them are going to be, some are going to be made in Virginia and it's apple wine. And some are
Mm,
really, really high end Cabernets out of California. But again, wine being so personal and wine being such a, personal enjoyment and your palate is so unique to yourself that there is a wine out there for everybody. And it's just a
yeah.
matter of finding it. It's like, oh darn, I have to go taste a bunch of wine and find one that I really like. Like, oh, such a bummer.
Right. Well, one of the things that I tried to like, and I try to talk to new wine drinkers about this, is to understand there's one thing that I think people kind of get overwhelmed by is all these names of all these varietals. And I'm just like, I was pulling one of my friends aside. I was like, it's just different grapes. They have different flavors. And maybe they're farmed a little bit different. But it leads me to ask you this. What are some overlooked grape varietals that you think deserve more love?
Hmm. Oh, see, that's tricky. So like I said, I'm very partial to Italian wines.
Yeah.
Grew up drinking field reds, and that was just what I was raised on. I do think that there are definitely some, both reds and whites that deserve a little bit more attention.
Hmm.
For anybody that likes Sauvignon Blanc, I always suggest trying Vermentino. It's an Italian white. It's bright, it's crisp, it's acidic, it's beautiful. For anybody that likes the big, heavy reds, why not try a Syrah? Instead of
Hmm.
going to your typical cab, why not look at a Syrah that's got about, 8, 10 years on it and see what you can find there? Um, and I love, I love a good Gamay just because they're so random and they can be produced really well. They're just hard to find. A really solid Barolo or Tempranillo, just because there's so much life in wine and there's so many
Yeah.
incredible flavors and nuances that can be discovered. And we love, Merlot or a Grenache with like Thanksgiving. Grenache is kind of our Thanksgiving
Yeah.
go-to wine. And
Mm,
my our this year our Grenache was so my best friend in Washington, she lives in Walla Walla. She produces a Grenache sin salt blend,
ooh,
and it is
ooh,
a rock star. Holy
yeah,
crap. It is so fantastic. Um and so, yeah, everybody likes the big cabs and, the red blends and things like that. But I think the lesser known, especially like I said, I'm very partial to Italian wines. So that's kind of my fixation
yeah,
is looking at Italian and Spanish wines, because they come from climates other than Napa. Everybody in
yeah.
Napa makes tab now, and that didn't used to be the case. And so it's like if you can
No.
find a really good, affordable Napa Merlot, or
Hmm.
a really good affordable Napa Zinfandel, like those are the wines to jump on because those are
Yeah.
probably going to be priced a little bit lower. Let's face it, everybody
Hmm.
wants to make the next $500 Cabernet, and it's like, yeah, okay, lofty goals, I get it, that's it's worthy, but there's a lot of really good wine out there that's only going to be 30, 40, $50 a bottle by comparison. And so
Yeah.
especially if you're emerging into this journey, if you're in a place that's you're just starting out, shelling out a couple hundred bucks for a bottle you may not like is kind of a risky strategy. I mean, if you can,
Right.
by all means, go for it. But and ask your friends and ask your family and look for stuff that's unusual. Look for producers that are doing the Grenaches and the Gamays and the Sinsalts and the random field blends that you're just like, I have no idea what's in this, but it's fantastic. And there's a lot of those out there.
Yep. I had one recently from Australia, and it was just this mix of all these things, and I just was like, "This is delicious."
Yeah.
And, sometimes, man, sometimes you just have to toss out what's supposed to be good and just go along with what is good, you
Just
know?
go for it. Yeah. Yeah, and it's such a personal journey too. And
Yeah.
that's one thing that I've always tried to share with people is your journey doesn't have to look like the person next to you. Your journey
Yeah.
is going to be so yourself. And it's like I am the first person to admit like if I have a choice, I'm going to be drinking on a Tuesday night, I'm going to be drinking a cheap white. I
Mm,
like my red with foods, but it's rare that I will you know, willingly open a big bottle of red by myself. I'm a single parent, so I live by myself, and so it's like I'm not going to open a bottle of red by myself on a Tuesday. But
right.
I can crack open a cheap Sauvignon Blanc or just a
Yeah.
cheap white, and it's easy to drink. It's reliable and things like that. And then when I have an opportunity to I had dinner with a girlfriend last night and I took a new Malbec that I had found. And
Mm.
it was a fantastic dinner. We had such a great time. And it's such an experience. But, it's, pace yourself, explore your journey, enjoy
Yes.
it. And it will look exactly the way that it's supposed to. It doesn't need to look
I
like anybody else's.
I love that because too, like, one of the things that for me I think is really important is that I hope, and I see this beginning to be a resurgence, that wine is becoming more accessible after it
I
got
do.
less accessible for a
Yes.
time. Like, it
Yeah.
seems that everyone definitely when I was living in the valley, I felt like it was way more accessible, like 15, 20 years ago, and then it swung the other way, and it's swinging back, and I like the swings that are happening because
Yeah.
and it's a whole new generation that's learning to embrace wine. There
Mhm.
is, um, the I think for a long time the boomers were definitely a target audience that people
For
were like
sure.
they wanted to focus on the baby boomers, people that had this extra money. Gen X kind of got into it, and now millennials are discovering wine, and Gen Z's like, well, what about us? And there's like a
Yeah.
whole other segment that's there. What do you think that the industry or the valley or just anywhere we can do to make wine more accessible? I'm making videos about Mr. Beast and the
Yeah.
wine varietal.
And Taylor Swift.
And Taylor Swift. I also did the Mr.
Yeah.
Beast one. I thought Mr. Beast was a Chardonnay, man. So, and there's a
You
reason
know, I
behind that.
Yeah, oh, for sure. Oh, absolutely, I see that one. I think that as this generational shift happens, is that one thing that I tell all of my clients, either my OrderPort clients or anyone that I work with on a, one-on-one level, is that your story is going to be the most important thing. And
Yep.
wine doesn't need to be snooty or pretentious. It is about the passion for the craft, and being able to share that is going to resonate with people far more than a fancy
Yep.
label and a big price tag.
Yep.
And it's really funny because everybody's panicking because the industry's in a downturn and yada yada yada. And it's kind of funny because when I counsel people and when I work with clients, they're like, well, we're seeing these big drops. And I'm like, well, yeah, because 2020 and 2021 were complete outliers. If you
Yeah.
remove those 2 years
Right.
from from the bar
Everyone
graph
was
for the
stuck
last
at home,
5
man.
years,
you know?
Daddy, everybody is
Yeah.
going to be fine. Everybody is going
Yeah.
to be all right. Wine consumption shifts. It goes up and it goes down. And, everybody's like, oh, well, the Gen Z aren't drinking wine. Well, yeah, at 22, I wasn't either. I was standing in parking lots
right.
chugging Four Locos. Like, I wasn't
right.
like,
Right.
and
I
so
think it's spot on. It's something that people don't realize that I don't think anyone, Gen X wasn't drinking wine at 20 years old. Neither was
no,
the
they were drinking
millennials
Mad
weren't.
Dog 2020. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it's an acquired taste, and it's something that I think comes with a little bit of maturity. I think that it's
yeah.
something that, again, when you're in your early 20s, you're not going to sit down with your friends and enjoy, a leisurely bottle of wine over dinner. No, you're doing jello shots at a party. Like it's such a completely different lifestyle. But as you start to soften a
God,
little bit,
Jello
and it's
shots. Oh, you just gave me horrible flashbacks. So,
sorry, it's a little early for that, I know. But and it's something that you start to experience, as you start to mature and as you start to just kind of
yeah,
relax a little bit. Now like my girlfriends and I, like, we would all go out. Well, now we're all moms. And so now what we
right.
do is when we have an opportunity, one of us brings a bottle of wine and
Yep.
we hang out while our kids play and we enjoy a new bottle of wine. And it becomes a part of the lifestyle. And I
Yes.
think that it's an opportunity for us to engage, and it's an opportunity for us to just enjoy something. And especially when you look at the world that we live in today, it's so frenetic, it's so chaotic, it's so busy, and we are just on sensory overload from not only from work, but constantly being glued to our phones and social media and things
Yeah.
like that.
Right.
And wine, for me, especially, I like being able to just put my phone down. And
Yeah.
it's so funny. People are like, oh, well, what's the best wine you had? What's the best wine you had recently? I'm like, I wish I could tell you the name of it. I didn't take a picture of it because I was too busy enjoying it to, make it a social media moment.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where it's like it gives you a chance to just, at least for me, I find it so settling and I find it so relaxing in the sense that you can literally immerse yourself in such a sensory experience. Say that 5 times fast. And really just enjoy something.
Yeah.
And you can chug a beer. Like that's great. Go, go shotgun a beer. That's great. But wine isn't something you do that with. Wine is something that you sit and you sip and you just enjoy it. And I think it really gives people an opportunity, and especially because a lot of people pair it with food. And so wine and food, it becomes this very whole body, very immersive experience. And good wine has to be experienced. Again, I'm going to shamelessly plug my best friend Brooke, her wine Delmas out of Washington. It is the way that she farms and the way that she does everything is so unique. She is blowing decades of standards out of the water and completely redoing everything that she does. And her wine speaks to it. And when her wine is very visceral in the sense that when you sip it, if you know anything about the brand, you are instantly transported right into that vineyard. And you are standing in this vineyard in the Rocks District at Milton Freewater, and you're seeing these mountains with snow and you're seeing all of this cobble and you can physically taste it. And it's a little trippy. It's a little bit of an out of body experience, but being able to really kind of just give yourself over to this whole experience of enjoying it. It's not something that a lot of people, I think, are doing. And I think wine is an opportunity for people to really slow down and
I love
really
that.
just kind of enjoy a moment and unplug a little bit. Like, yeah, and there's wine tastings that you can do virtually, and there's, people are blogging and talking on their phones and doing all these posts and stuff like that. But one of the things that I try to recommend to people is, especially if you're going to go to like a new tasting room, put your phone down and
Yep.
just immerse yourself and just enjoy it for even if it's just for a few minutes. Give
Yeah.
yourself an opportunity to just unplug and absorb everything about that experience. You were talking about that night that you remembered, with your brother's landlord. That experience was so immersive. And you're going to
Yeah.
remember that for how long? How long has it been since that night, do you think?
10 years.
Yeah,
10 years.
exactly. And so, and it's like I can remember, the wine that we poured on my 25th birthday. I remember exactly what wine it was. I remember exactly how it tasted.
Mm-hmm.
And so that opportunity, I think, creating those memories, I remember who was there. I remember who we were
Yeah.
sitting with. And so I think that for a lot of people, it's an opportunity to start creating those memories again and really making it about that connection and that community in comparison to, chugging something.
I recently I had a guest on and we said that wine is an analog experience in a digital world. And it's something
Yes.
that's so needed right now is to get back to that analog when we're surrounded now by AI and by social
Mhm.
media that's constantly filling our phones up with chaos and
Yeah.
craziness, and we have everyone trying to split us, apart. And yet, like you'd said, that quote was so brilliant. I'm gonna butcher it, but like how a bottle of wine can bring four strangers and turn them into friends. Yeah, like
Yeah.
that's powerful,
Yeah.
powerful stuff. Let me ask you one last question. Where can people
Yeah.
find out more about you and what you're doing?
I would say probably LinkedIn. So you can find me on LinkedIn. It's Lailand Flaherty. And right, like I said, right now, vice president of OrderPort. I also do consulting on the side for small wine brands, just in terms of marketing and branding and messaging. I love to tell stories.
I love
And
that.
it is one of my greatest joys to help other people tell their stories. So yeah, if they want to find me on LinkedIn, I'm there. That's probably going to be the most efficient way.